Hello, what I'd like to do in this series of videos, audio recordings actually, is go through each of the acts of Shakespeare's Othello and point out some of the major details and also some of the minor details. There's a lot, of course, going on in this play, but I'm fascinated with how well this play holds up. There are many themes that are definitely applicable to our society today, and I bet that any students reading this play won't have difficulty identifying with at least a few of the conflicts that we see going on in the play and that we see characters have to struggle with. Some of them handle the conflicts better than others, but let's go through Act 1 in this audio log. Notice that the backdrop of this video, just to give you something to look at while you listen, this is actually a famous statue of the god Janus, and this is going to come back especially with our depiction of Iago. Iago is the villain of this play, and many scholars would argue that Iago is one of the better Shakespearean villains. I'm not sure if he's my favorite, but he's up there. He's towards the top of the list. And one thing that's so disturbing about Iago is just his ability to wear a mask very well, and we only sometimes see what's really behind that mask. But he seems to wear this mask so well that he may even deceive himself, and we'll talk about this later on when we talk about the motives that Iago gives us for why he's doing what he's doing. And just when we ask ourselves, what's the point of all this? Why is Iago causing so much suffering? Why is he risking so much in doing this manipulation or this series of manipulations? But we do have the god Janus, actually his name invoked by Iago in Act 1. And just to give you this statue, some context of, we'll talk about the irony of Iago using Janus as the god that he appeals to. So Act 1, it's interesting that we start with immediate deception. And the immediate deception we have is Rodrigo and Iago are together. Um, Rodrigo is basically a rich fool for the purpose of this play, and it's a perfect target uh, for Iago. We know that Iago enjoys taking money from Rodrigo. This seems kind of just something he does for fun and also for monetary gain, manipulating Rodrigo, lying to Rodrigo. Basically, these two gentlemen are together because secretively Othello and Desdemona have gotten married. They've done so in secret. It's been done, and this destroys Rodrigo because Rodrigo thinks he's in love with Desdemona. He has tried to court Desdemona, but Desdemona has refused his advances, as Brabantio, that's Desdemona's father, will tell us. Um, Rodrigo thinks that he can employ Iago to woo Desdemona for him, that he can give Iago money, and that Iago will spend this money on tokens of love for Desdemona that he'll give to Desdemona in Rodrigo's name. And of course, we know this is just foolish. But this goes back to one of the major differences between Rodrigo and Othello. Othello is a man of action. And we'll see this several times. Othello truly believes that actions should speak for themselves. Rodrigo seems the antithesis for this. Rodrigo is someone who thinks that he can woo Desdemona through someone else's actions. He just employs somebody else to do it. He thinks that love can be bought, rather than Othello, who thinks that love is something that has to be won. And we'll get that. He says a line in Act 1 where he wins the possession Desdemona. We'll look at that in just a bit. So we do start with immediate deception here because Iago is deceiving Rodrigo. We also have some level of deception with the secret wedding ceremony that's taken place. Um, we do find here one of the immediate reasons given for why Iago dislikes or even hates. He does say hate. It goes beyond mere dislike. Iago says that he hates the Moor, that he hates Othello. And the reason that he gives here is basically something that we may identify with. He was passed over for a promotion that he feels is rightly his. He feels that he earned the promotion. What happened is that Othello is basically like a commanding general of Italy. He's a military leader, and Othello chose Cassio as his second-hand man rather than Iago. Iago is third in command rather than second. And this really bothers Iago because he says that Cassio, who Othello picked, was only picked because of his education, that uh, he says that he's a master of, he's mere prattle without practice is all of his soldiership. Basically, Iago sees himself as a man of experience, even though he doesn't have the scholastic background of military. He's someone who's been in the heat of battle with Othello, and that the experience should have won him that second-hand position rather than Cassio's lack of experience. But Cassio has more education. Um, this is a conflict that I bet several of us may have encountered on some level. Many students may return to school later on in their lives because they face the same frustration that Iago faces here. There's someone who's getting a promotion over you because of the education they have, not because of what they know really, but because of what degrees, what education they have. But you may have more experience, more practical experience than the person who gets the promotion. Iago does tell Rodrigo that he deserves to be second in command, and therefore it decides that since he can't be second in command, he might as well just destroy Othello and Cassio, and then he would be first in command. Now, we'll question this logic because there's a point where he wins. This is in a later act. He successfully um, dislodges Cassio as second in command. And so, if that were the goal of why he's doing what he's doing, we have to ask ourselves, why didn't he stop? He got what he wants. He gets what he wants very early in the play. If we trust what he says here, that the reason he's doing this is because Cassio's second in command rather than himself. So. We will move on. Iago basically says to Rodrigo as they make this plan that he's going to help Rodrigo out, but he has to do so secretively, and he's going to follow Othello to serve his turn upon him. This idea of uh, a mask of friendliness and a mask of kindliness being a much more dangerous mask to wear than one of treachery. If you have an enemy that you're trying to attack, that appearing as a friend may be the best way to achieve that attack. And so Iago is trying to assure Rodrigo here that although I appear that I am on Othello's side, have no doubt everything I do is to undermine him. Um, he says that he will wear his heart upon his sleeve for dogs to peck out. I am not what I am. And this is an important line because this is actually, it should be a warning to Rodrigo. I mean, this is a bit of dramatic irony here. We know the villain that Iago is. He's showing his cards here to Rodrigo saying, I am not what I am. And Rodrigo should really take him literally, take his word here, and not trust Iago. But of course, Rodrigo, like I said, he is a bit of a fop. He's just foolish. And he just, over and over, he's so, he's fickle. He gets his dander up and he gets mad, and then Iago is able to soothe him and redirect him however he wants. So Rodrigo seems the perfect puppet for Iago to manipulate. It's also an important line that I am not what I am because it's actually a perversion of a scripture line of God saying, uh, I think it's I am what I, maybe not I am what I am, but something like that. I think I am what I am is Popeye, but it's a version. I think it's I am that I am. Yeah, that's what it is. There's a scripture where God says, I am that I am. And so this is a good manipulation, a good perversion. It's the antithesis of that scriptural verse, which does kind of cement his evil nature. Um, Notice that we do have racism appear in the first few pages of the play. And racism is a huge theme of this play. The race of Othello is not something that's accidental. Many people do talk about the blackness of Othello's race, although critically, I've seen some people argue that he wouldn't be African American, he would be Egyptian, that he wouldn't be necessarily black as race, but a different race. But basically, he's not white. And so there are many characters who do bring that up, and it's not in a good way either, as we have here, where Iago says, oh, I'm sorry, no, this is Rodrigo calls him the thick lips. So this would be a racial slur almost immediately. And this is going to be important when we talk about Othello. And Othello is a man who seems full of insecurity. Although he's a powerful man, he's a military leader, he's very insecure. And I think psychologically it makes sense when you look at and see how the people of his society view him, not because of the actions that he's able to do, but really they do view him based on his skin color. And I think that does kind of affect him in an inescapable way. So Iago makes this plan for them to go rouse up and wake up Desdemona's father and tell on the secret marriage that's taken place. And so that's what they go to do. Notice that there's a bit of an identity theft here, that Iago says, you do the talking, Rodrigo. You wake him up, and they basically go in front of his house and yell into his window about, kind of some body lines that we'll get into, but trying to warn Brabantio, who is Desdemona's father, about what has happened, about looking to his daughter. Uh, and it's funny because Iago says, I'll let you do it, yet Iago steps in and he speaks as if he were Rodrigo. And Rodrigo is trying to wake up Brabantio, and Rodrigo says, Senor, is all your family within? Brabantio says, why, wherefore ask you this? And Iago speaks as if he is Rodrigo. He imitates Rodrigo, saying, even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. So here we have a couple things. We have this body humor that we'll see throughout the play, kind of this adult humor, sexual innuendo and things like this. That's common for Shakespearean plays. It's, there's entertainment value there for the crowds and other things as well. But we also have this theme we have of Othello being described in bestial imagery that we'll see several places. We see it here. We'll continue to see Othello referred to not as a man, but as a beast. And that definitely goes back to the prejudice we have. It's a two-faced society. It's a society that would employ someone who is not white as a military leader. However, he's not seen as an equal in this society. It's a double standard. It's a two-faced society, just as we have our two-faced Iago here. I do like that there's some humor here that continues where there's a point where, uh, let's see if I can find that senator line. Yeah, it's funny because yes, here it is. So Brabantio says down to Iago, thinking that he's talking to Brabantio. Or I'm sorry, he thinks he's talking to Rodrigo. Brabantio says, you are a villain. And Iago says, you are a senator. And the implication here is like a senator would be a worse insult than calling someone a villain. And this may be another connection to our world today, that we may have some villainous political leaders in our society today. I do like here that Brabantio says, this thou shalt answer. I know thee, Rodrigo. Notice Rodrigo's not been talking as much as Iago has. So Iago here has successfully kind of identity thefted Rodrigo. It's almost like if this were a wall post on Facebook where someone else has logged into your account and said things with your name tag that you did not say, and someone else takes it as you speaking. We see that happening here, and that I just think is funny. I like that. Notice we have another early theme established. Brabantio, after the conversation, he says basically, wake up, give me a light, call up all my people. He says, this accident is not unlike my dream. Belief of it oppresses me already. This is going to be something we see throughout the play, where Iago is skilled at targeting doubts that people already have, pre-existing doubts. And so Brabantio here has a pre-existing doubt, something that's nagging him. He's dreamed about it. He's had a bad dream. And here Iago gives very little proof of it has happened. This marriage has happened, but the proof of the marriage happening has not been provided to Brabantio. However, because Brabantio's heart already partially believes it, proof is not needed. And that's going to be something we definitely see with Othello. Othello says that he demands proof for the accusations against Desdemona, but we see the proof that's given is not proof at all. The proof is very subjective rather than objective proof of Desdemona's infidelities with Cassio. Let's move on a little bit. Brabantio is convinced that if this is true, if Desdemona has married Othello in secret, that it's not through her own power, that it has to be through the power of witchcraft, that this is something that Othello has done to Desdemona, and she's not a willing participant with it. Now, this is interesting because Brabantio and Othello were fast friends. In fact, Othello met Desdemona through his friendship with Brabantio. So it's interesting here, going back to this two-faced society. We have Brabantio here showing two faces as well. Othello is a fine friend for Brabantio to have. He's welcome to come over to his house and visit and eat with him, keep counsel with him. But notice that when it comes to his daughter, Othello is not good enough, and it seems purely based on his race. Brabantio is very vocal about the race of Othello, and Othello being something that Desdemona should fear because of his race and shirk away from, and that therefore it must be witchcraft, that she would not willingly look on this person with love when she should look at him with like disgust. And this shows the racism of Brabantio, that even though Othello is a fine friend for him, when it comes down to it of him being an adequate companion for his daughter, we see that racism surface, that the mask of pleasantry he may wear before with Othello, that mask of pleasantry falls aside, and we see how he truly is. Um, We go on to scene two. In scene two, we find here Iago doing what he said he was going to do to Rodrigo. He tells Rodrigo that I'm going to go act as Othello's friend. And although it appears I'm his friend, I'm really on your side. Notice here that Iago is immediately at scene two talking against Rodrigo because they're raising this alarm about the marriage that's happened. And Othello seems pretty confident. He doesn't seem rattled. He doesn't seem afraid. He basically says, let his actions speak louder than words can speak. And this goes back to the core character of Othello. He believes that actions should speak louder than words, but it's frustrating because that's not really what happens. We see that Iago's words speak louder to Othello than Desdemona's actions, that Othello chooses to believe Iago's words over Desdemona's actions of just loving him. He does say here that I love the gentle Desdemona. I would not my unhoused, free condition put into circumscription and confine for the sea's worth. So here, these lines indicate that he does love Desdemona. Now, you can argue that he really does love her or not based on how he treats her in this play, but it is interesting to look at, and it's a discussion we can have on the discussion board if you think Othello really does love Desdemona. If he does love her, does he love her throughout, or does that love change? Does it turn to hate, or is it just a sick love that can sometimes happen? And then we have also our pledge here. Othello says, "Not I must be found. My part, my title, and my perfect soul shall manifest me rightly. Is it they?" And Iago says, "By Janus, I think no." Now notice here, instead of saying by God, it seems that Iago is so evil that he can't kind of pledge to a divine power. He has to pledge to a pagan power, this two-faced god, Janus. Moving on, we've got this bawdy humor continue. Um, where Cassio and Iago are talking, and Iago is being a bit bawdy, saying what's happened to Cassio, that Cassio didn't realize that Othello has married Desdemona. Let's see here. We go to a challenge between Brabantio's forces and Othello's forces. Notice that Iago is with Othello on the side of Othello, and notice that Iago targets Rodrigo. He says, "You, Rodrigo, come, sir, I am for you." This is ironic because he's told Rodrigo, "Hey, buddy, although I look like I'm Othello's friend, I'm really your friend. I'm for you." And here he calls out Rodrigo and specifically points to him, saying, "I will fight you. You are my opponent." Brabantio continues to blame witchcraft for enslaving Desdemona to love Othello, and he says, um, would ever have to encourage General Mock, run from her guardage to the city bosom of such a thing as thou. That's terrible. Here we have race. He calls Othello not a man, but such a thing. So we do see this disgust that Brabantio has towards Othello and the word choice that he uses in talking to Othello. I like here this violence that's happened. Othello immediately is able to calm this violence because Othello is somebody, he doesn't speak a whole lot. Um, I would argue, and many others argue, that Othello is very well spoken when he does speak. He speaks with clarity. He speaks with not really simplicity, but Iago goes on and on and on and on, and Othello, there's a beautiful simplicity to what he says. I like it here that he basically is able to calm this violence by saying, "Were it my cue to fight, I should have known it without a prompter." And this shows not only his violent nature, but also this Othello is a man of physical power, and he can be a very imposing man. And he uses that here to say, "Hey, if it were time to fight, guys, I would know because my sword would be the first one out." Let's go on to scene 3. So here we have basically a meeting, and this is a meeting discussing military action against the Turks. So we have here basically like a war council, because they're going to have to go to war with the Turks. Military is important in this for a little bit because that's kind of Othello's background. He is a man of war. He's fought in many wars. He's a strategist. He's good at it. He's a good soldier. But here they are basically, before Othello gets there, the political leadership of Italy are discussing this upcoming war with the Ottomans, the Turks. Um, Brabantio kind of bursts upon this meeting, and he decides to use this meeting to charge Othello with witchcraft. Um, and he says that to the senators and the duke, that she is abused, stolen from me, and corrupted by spells and medicines bought off mountebanks. So this idea of witchcraft being the reason why Desdemona has been taken from him, like she's an object that can be stolen, and it's she didn't do it from her own free will, according to her father. Notice here that Brabantio, or excuse me, notice that Othello is good at playing the crowd. Othello is able to do something that I encourage my students in composition to do. He analyzes his audience and he appeals to his audience's value system. He says, "Most potent, grave, and reverend signors, my very noble and approved good masters." That's a very good way to respectfully begin your discussion with the people who are about to judge if you have committed a crime or not. And this is very different than the language of Brabantio. Brabantio does not have the respect that Othello is able to show here. Um, He basically, Othello confirms that he is a warrior, that he is a man of war. He says that he's rude in speech. He says, "Rude am I in my speech, and little blessed with the soft phrase of peace." Um, this isn't really true, though. Although it may be true he's not good at peace, he is well spoken. It's just he chooses to be quiet more than he chooses to speak because he is a man who believes action should speak more than words. And we find, though, that that may not be the case in reality, and it may not be the case today. We may have a society today that allows words to speak more than action. That may be something we want to talk about on the discussion board. Notice that Othello ultimately says, "I won his daughter." I think that's interesting as far as objectifying Desdemona, that once again, she didn't freely choose that he won her away from Brabantio. We have continued prejudice from Brabantio. The Duke asks for proof of the accusation, and here we have to point out something that's terribly frustrating to me. Because here the senators are like, this is a pretty big accusation you're giving against Othello. Othello is an important person in our society. I'm going to need some proof. And Othello basically says, if you want proof, ask Desdemona. And the ultimate irony of this is when Iago starts talking to Othello about Desdemona's infidelity. Othello should have heeded the advice that he gives here. He should have talked to Desdemona immediately about it, and he does not. So this is a frustrating line for me because it's just kind of like, I feel like, is it Tiresias, the doomed prophet, where I see the future, or Cassandra, that I'm able to see this bad future that's coming, but you can't warn anybody about it because they won't believe you. Here, this line, Othello says, if you want to know the truth, ask Desdemona. And you know that that's not going to be logic that he continues to follow that would have saved the tragedy that ultimately happens. And so as they go to fetch Desdemona, Othello talks about basically how they fell in love with each other, that they fell in love through the friendship he had with her father Brabantio, that when he would go to Brabantio and talk about his life, Desdemona would listen. And Othello would talk about all the hardships and obstacles and just bad things that happened to him in his life of slavery before he got freed. And Desdemona was sympathetic of these troubles, and that sympathy that she showed to him also won over Othello's heart. He says, she loved me for the dangers I'd passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. Um, Desdemona arrives, and when she is Desdemona is actually a pretty strong character here, at least. Um, I have trouble with Desdemona other places. Here, I like that Desdemona, when she's confronted, and Brabantio basically says, admit that, you were bewitched. Desdemona says, my noble father, I do perceive here a divided duty. To you I am bound for life and education. My life and education both do learn me how to respect you. You are the lord of duty. I am hitherto your daughter, but here my husband, and so much duty as my mother showed to you, preferring you before her father, so much I challenge that I may profess, due to the more, my lord. This is a great example of what's called pathos. Pathos is where you ask your audience, put yourself in my shoes. You're kind of emotionally connecting to the audience on an imagination level of imagine if you were me. And Desmond basically imagine when you with mom, where her loyalty should be. Should mom's loyalty be to her father or to you? Just as you know it should be to you as the husband, so should my loyalty be not with you, but to my husband, Othello. And that's really persuasive turn of logic. That's well done, I think. Brabantio gives in basically, and he doesn't like give his daughter's hand, he's pissed, but he basically washes his hands of this situation, and he basically disowns Desdemona. She no longer has a place under his household, and this we'll see because Othello knows that he's going to have to go to war. He's being sent off to Cyprus, the island, to basically wage war with the Turks. And he knows that he won't be there with Desdemona, so he's curious where she can be. The Duke says, well, she can be at her father's, and Brabantio immediately says, I'll not have that so. Notice that Othello says, nor I, so Othello's not going to have her stay at her dad's place. And here Desdemona says, nor I. Here these men are fine speaking for her, but she's able to finally say her opinion. I would not there reside. And here Desdemona once again shows great strength of character, and she talks to these male senators who are the patriarchal powerhouse of the society, and she's able to say, my place is by my husband's side. Don't think that I request this for any selfish reasons. Othello says, yeah, it's not to satisfy lust at all, but she's able to very effectively convince the leaders that she should go with Othello and the war charge that he's been given, and they agree to let her be with Othello. Um, One of the senators or the duke says basically to Brabantio, kind of, take heart. Your son-in-law is far more fair than black. This is again some racism. Basically, the Duke saying, even though he's black, he's not that bad of a guy, and that of course is problematic considering that they're requesting him to go fight a war, win a war for them. Um, Brabantio, this is an important line, so if you've kind of fallen asleep in this lecture, perk up. We will discuss where's the first seed of doubt planted in Othello's mind concerning the infidelity of Desdemona. And many of you may see that as Iago. And that could be an argument we make. But look here. Notice that Brabantio, one of the last things that he says to Othello, is a warning. He says, look to her more, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father and may thee. Now, this to me is definitely a mustard seed that takes root, and it's one that Iago far later in the play continues to water. He reminds Othello that, you know what, she deceived her father when she married you in secret, so what's to say that she's not deceiving you now? So I do think it's interesting here in Act 1, it seems the first seed arguably is one planted not by Iago, but it is later encouraged, and it later does grow through Iago's help. The end of this act, we have Iago talking with Rodrigo, and it's a bit funny because Iago's trying to basically cheer up Rodrigo because Rodrigo's like, oh no, she's married. Oh, my courtship is lost now. She can't be mine. And Iago doesn't want that to be because he wants more money. If Rodrigo gives up his pursuit of Desdemona, then the purse strings will be tied shut, and he doesn't want that. He can play this fiddle for much longer, he knows. And so Iago says, "Oh, don't worry. You still have hope. Basically, you need to follow along in secret." So here, Rodrigo is convinced by Iago to go in secret under a disguise to the island of Cyprus so that he may continue to woo Desdemona because he's saying that, she'll tire of the Moor. Uh, you still have a chance. Don't drown yourself. His bottom line is put money to your purse. So basically, he's saying save money, give me money, because the purse here would be Iago. He's saying basically, give me money so I can give it to Desdemona so that I can buy her favor back to you. And so we end the act with maybe the first time we see Iago alone and Iago allowing his mask to come off and Iago to speak truthfully, although maybe even not then. He says, Rodrigo says, I'm going to go sell all my land so I'll have lots of money. And Iago's like, thus do I ever make my fool my purse. I'm doing this for sport and profit. And he says, I hate them more. He's done my office. I know not if it be true, but I, for mere suspicion in that kind, will do as if it is for surety. So here we have yet another possible motivation for Iago's hatred of Othello. Here he is by himself having what's called an aside. An aside is where you're saying internal thoughts out loud just so the audience can hear it. But he's saying basically, there are rumors that Othello has slept with my wife Amelia. And although I don't know if these are more than rumors, I'm going to act on it as if it is surety. We'll come back to that because that doesn't really make sense, especially when we see how uh, Iago treats Amelia, his wife. He does hatch a plan, and he decides that he's going to use Cassio as a pawn to undo the love between Othello and Desdemona. And he says at the end, I have it. It is engendered. Hell and night must bring this monstrous birth to the world's light. So this is yet another appellation to hell and to evil that Iago makes. He's not able to appeal to heaven, but he doesn't have any problem appealing to the powers of hell. So we'll wrap it up there on Act 1, and the next video will be on Act 2. Thanks, guys.